Good evening, and Ade Shoma Mubarak. I hope any of you who are running in the marathon today, I hope you've recovered, and I welcome you back here. I'm Steve Ross. I'm professor of history at USC, and I'm the director of the Kazan Institute for the study of the Jewish role in American life. And on behalf of the Kazan Institute, Sinai Temple, and the Jewish Community Foundation of Los Angeles, it's my great pleasure to invite you here tonight for our event, Weaving the Tapestry of Ancestry and Modernity, the next generation of Iranian Jewish women in literature and academia. Before we begin tonight's event, I ask you to join me in a moment of silence as we mourn for the victims of the October 7th massacre in Israel and pray for the safe return of the hostages and peace for all innocent people trapped in a cycle of violence and chaos. So if we could just have 15 minutes of silence. In honor of Nowruz, the Persian New Year, and our three partnering organizations, we're proud to host a discussion tonight featuring a panel of distinguished Iranian Jewish women who are the pillars of the community and whose voices have come to define excellence in literature and academia. Our panel discussion will feature best-selling authors, world-class scholars, award-winning journalists, a leading contemporary novelist, and a pair of Harvard graduates who are not only best-selling authors, but happen to be cousins. Our panelists will be introduced in greater detail by tonight's honoree and moderator, Gina Nahai. Gina Nahai is a best-selling author and former professor of creative writing at USC, and most of all, a friend of mine. Her novels have been translated into 18 languages and have been selected as one of the best books of the year by the Los Angeles Times and Chicago Tribune. She is the winner of numerous awards, including the Los Angeles Arts Council Award, the Persian Heritage Foundation Award, and the Simon Rockower Award. Her writings have appeared in the Los Angeles Times, the Chicago Tribune, San Francisco Chronicle, Los Angeles Magazine, and Huffington Post. Gina's first novel, Cry of the Peacock, told for the first time in any Western language the 3,000-year-old story of the Jewish people of Iran. It won the Los Angeles Council Award for Fiction, and her second novel, Moonlight on the Avenue of Faith, was a finalist for the Orange Prize in England, the IMPCA Award in Dublin, and the Harold Ribelow Award in the United States. It was also a #1 bestseller on the Los Angeles Times and one of its best books of the year. Her third novel, Sunday Silence, was also an LA Times bestseller and a best book of the year. And her fourth novel, Captain Rain, and this is unfair to the rest of us who write. Most of us writers think if we could get on a bestseller list for 1 week, that would be amazing. Her fourth book was also an LA Times bestseller and was the Persian Heritage Foundation Award. Gina is a frequent lecturer on contemporary politics in the Middle East and has been a guest on PBS, CNBC, and numerous other programs. And this brings me to maybe my most pleasurable moment as director of the Kazan Institute. Lisa, you could come up. Gina, can I have you come up here? I'll take this. This is Lisa Ansel, the Associate Director of the Kazan Institute. And the person behind tonight's event. This is all of Lisa's idea.
Absolutely.
As she said, we originally planned this for before the pandemic, and then a few things happened over the last 4 years. Gina, from your many literary achievements in bringing the voice of Iranian Jewish women to a new level of international prominence and renown, it is my honor to present you tonight with the Kasdan Institute's inaugural Kasdan Trailblazers Award. Take the bag. Yes. Your work and vision has inspired a new generation of Iranian Jewish female voices who have turned and opened our eyes to even larger worlds. Your success as a mentor of young authors is evident in the caliber of authors and scholars who share the stage with you tonight. Gina, thank you for your leadership, your wisdom, and the magic occurs when you put your pen to paper. You are a trailblazer in every sense of the word. Thank you. The format of tonight's event, just so that you know what's coming, our panelists will engage in a lively discussion for about an hour, and Gina will be our moderator, at which point the last 20 or 30 minutes or so, we will have Q&A. Lisa will have a microphone, we'll go around, and if you have a question, just stand up or raise your hand, and the mic will come to you. It is now my pleasure to introduce Rabbi Nicole Guzek of Sinai Temple to offer a few words of welcome. Rabbi Guzek, the bima is yours. You will invite Lou then when you're done, right? Lou Groner.
Perfect. Can I read this here?
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
Gina, you are a trailblazer. It's an honor to witness you receiving this award this afternoon. You're a role model to us all. Tonight, I wanted to wish you Mazel Tov. And this evening, I also wanted to share just for a moment about one of the major themes of Purim. You see, in the scroll of the Megillah, there's one word that is noticeably missing. Anyone know? God. Exactly. God's name is missing from the Megillah. It's an occurrence called Hester Panim, what's known as the concealment or hiddenness of God's face. You would think that God seems to be missing from the story, but it's odd. A story that's clearly important to the future of the Jewish people. And here we have, right within the Megillah, the voice of Esther, this woman who finds courage to share her spirit, to share her convictions. She somehow convinces a king to spare the lives of the Jews, and it ultimately leads to the freedom and victory of our people. But when I hear that, and I hope when you hear that, I think to myself, all right, so God's name is absent from the story, but God is all over the Purim story. Because it's God who chooses Esther. It's God who reminds Esther of her righteous, holy mission. It's God who encourages, Esther, you have something vital to offer this world. I bring this up this evening because we are about to hear from 4 fierce, vibrant, strong, powerful Iranian Jewish women who aren't afraid, or at least it doesn't appear that way, to share their heart. They stand up, they speak out, and like all of you, when I hear them, when I read their words, when I see them, I am certain of one thing: God is working through each and every one of you. And we are the ones who are blessed to have you leading the way. And so this evening, I want to say what a blessing it is to have all of the voices here on this stage with Gina leading the conversation. I want to wish all of you a Nowruz Mubarak, and most of all, welcome to Sinai Temple. Thank you. And next on the agenda, it's my pleasure to introduce Lou Groner. Lou Groner is Vice President of Marketing and Communications at the Jewish Community Foundation.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Guzik, and thank you for your inspiring words of Torah. The Jewish Community Foundation of Los Angeles is the sponsor of tonight's event. We're delighted to be the sponsor. Thank you, Professor Ross, as well. And Mazel Tov to you, Gina, on this inaugural Kasdan Institute Trailblazer Award. Very well-deserved indeed. So why is the Jewish Community Foundation sponsoring tonight's event? I'll answer that by quoting a headline from one of our ads about giving tzedakah effectively. Quote, "If you think earning money is hard, try giving it away." I'll repeat it. If you think earning money is hard, try giving it away. Giving tzedakah effectively can be a complicated, confusing, and sometimes cumbersome affair. How do you know which are the best causes to support? And will they use your donation effectively? And will your contribution really make a difference? Sometimes it can be a difficult decision about who to support. However, when we at the Jewish Community Foundation got the call from the USC Kasdan Institute inquiring if we'd be interested in sponsoring tonight's event, it wasn't a complicated or confusing matter for us. Quite frankly, it was an easy decision for us. Our answer was yes, we'd be delighted to sponsor tonight's program. To be able to support a program showcasing such accomplished women of literature and academia from our vibrant Los Angeles Iranian Jewish community is truly an honor. And the foundation has long-standing ties to this community. As just one example, you may know of an organization called 30 Years After. It has positively impacted the lives of several thousand young Iranian Jewish people by promoting their civic and Jewish community engagement in LA, and it's made our city a better place to live in. We at the foundation gave 30 Years After significant seed funding some years ago to get started, and we are very proud indeed of that. And that is just one example. And on a more personal note, Gina, your husband David served as a trustee at the Jewish Community Foundation, on the Jewish Community Foundation's board for several years. I always loved hearing him speak at meetings, not only because of his great intelligence, but also because of his delightful British accent. And to be able to partner with USC Kasdan Institute, such an important and vital organization that strengthens the fabric of our community, with such thought-provoking lectures like this one throughout the year, is something we are also quite proud of. That's why supporting tonight's program was such an easy decision for us. And in conclusion, it's ironic, as Rabbi Guzik pointed out, that a week from today, we'll be celebrating the holiday of Purim. And we all know that it was a Persian Jewish woman, Queen Esther, who through her foresight, her action, and her love of the Jewish people, ultimately saved our people and strengthened and unified our community. So too this evening, we have the great privilege of learning from several Iranian Jewish women whose work, whose writings, and whose love of the Jewish people, like Queen Esther of ancient days, are strengthening our community and unifying our people. Without further ado, let's begin tonight's panel discussion. Gina, please.
Good evening. Thank you for being here. Thank you to the Kasdan Institute. If you are not familiar with Kasdan, they put on some fantastic educational and also entertaining panels and programs both online and in person. And it's really worth looking into and following their work. Thank you to Steve Ross for your friendship and for your guidance always, and to Lisa for being the heart and soul of this program, for putting it on, conceiving of it, single-handedly pulling everything together, including all by herself the Tapestry table, which I would like to take home at the end of the night, and the Tahdig bar. I think there's some, yeah, okay, and the Tahdig bar, which I didn't even know there is such a thing as a Tahdig bar. So Lisa, thank you so much. So I will in a minute introduce the panelists, and then I'm going to ask them, just for a little bit of fun, or maybe not some seriousness, to define themselves, each of them, in 10 words or fewer, just as a way to get the conversation going. But before I do that, I would like to acknowledge these are some very highly accomplished women on this panel, but I think they might agree with me when I say that what is most remarkable about this panel is that these are not unique individuals in our community. For all of their enormous accomplishments, they are only representative of the many, many other highly educated, driven, smart, accomplished women attorneys, doctors, surgeons, rabbis, cantors, filmmakers, and you name it, that we have had the privilege of knowing amongst ourselves. And most of them have done all of this at the same time as raising families and being faithful to all of the expectations as daughters and sisters and Shabbat dinner makers and everything else that Iranian Jewish women do. They, in turn, have come from a long line of successful Iranian Jewish women who spent their formative years and most of their adulthood in Iran, and who reached high levels of philanthropy and education despite the many, many limitations imposed on them in that country, both by the greater society and by the expectations of our own communities. And I don't mean just the ones who became MDs or attorneys. If you know anything, and I know that you all do, anything about the history of Iranian women, you will know that just making it through the day, despite all of the obstacles that they faced as women, was an act of great heroism. So I want to acknowledge all of the mothers and grandmothers and heroes and the real trailblazers in this audience and everywhere. Okay, now, trailblazers on this stage, I am going to start with my immediate right, Tina Hay, who is the founder and CEO of Napkin Finance, a visual guide to money. Tina is also the author of the best-selling book, Napkin Finance, Build Your Wealth in 30 Seconds or Less, or fewer, which the New York Times hailed as the best financial primer in years. Honestly, getting the New York Times to name anything as the best is a Herculean act, so kudos, Tina. Tina is a trusted resource speaker and advisor to numerous companies and platforms. She's been featured on the Today Show, CNBC, Forbes, the New York Times, and the Washington Post. Napkin Finance collaborates with companies such as JP Morgan Chase, UBS, AARP, and US Bank. Its distribution channels reach over 80 million people in the US and internationally. The company also provides pro bono content to nonprofits such as Michelle Obama's Better Make Room Initiative and the U.S. Olympic Committee. Tina holds a BA from UCLA and an MBA from Harvard University. In 10 words or fewer, Tina describes herself as
embracing the chaos and enjoying every minute.
good job. Next to Tina, Jasmine Lavi was born in Tehran and grew up in Los Angeles. She attended Loyola Law School and is a member of the bar. She lived in Israel for 2 years, where she practiced as a U.S. tax lawyer at Ernst & Young, Tel Aviv, then worked in marketing and sales. If you want to know more about her experiences in marketing and sales, I highly recommend you reading her book, Persian Tea. It is informative and highly entertaining. Jasmine has 2 daughters. She understands but doesn't speak Lishan Adan, which is Jewish Aramaic. How do you say it? Lishan Adan. She's written a number of books, among them Persian Tea, Loving Notes for a Beautiful Wife, and Noah, A Story of Courage. In 10 words or fewer, she defines herself as
curly hair advocate and Jewish matchmaker.
Oh, Jewish matchmaker is good. We will be talking to you after the program. I mean, okay, listen, everything else aside, books, careers and stuff, you gotta get married, so. Dr. Sabah Sumer, to my immediate left, is a director of training and education at American Jewish Committee. She comes to AJC after 20 years as a professor and university administrator, where she continues to teach religious studies and Middle Eastern history courses for graduate students. At AJC, Dr. Sumer facilitates anti-Semitism trainings and workshops for corporations, nonprofits, tech platforms, sports teams, music and talent agencies. Dr. Sumer teaches and writes extensively on world religions, women and religion, intersectionality and its impact on the Jewish community, and the geopolitics of the Middle East. Professor Sumer is the editor of the book Sephardi and Mizrahi Jews in America and the author of the book From the Shahs to Los Angeles, 3 Generations of Iranian Jewish Women Between Religion and Culture. In 10 words or fewer, Sabah defines herself as
trying to fight anti-Semitism while balancing being a mom and not losing my mind.
Speaking of trying not to lose your mind as a mom, Tavi Raphael is an award-winning weekly editorial columnist for the Jewish Journal of Greater Los Angeles. She also writes for the Los Angeles Magazine, Newsweek, Los Angeles Review of Books, and Moments Magazine. Born in the post-revolutionary Iran, Tabi came to the U.S. as a protected Jewish refugee and is also a child survivor of the Iran-Iraq War. She served in the realm of pro-Israel diplomatic and nonprofit advocacy for nearly 2 decades, and is also a co-founder and former executive director of 30 Years After. She holds a master's degree in public diplomacy from the University of Southern California and spent all day running after kids with their soccer and what else?
Bleaching the karate uniform for tonight's tournament.
Oh, bleaching the karate uniform. So my first question.
Where's my 10 words?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes.
Jomhuriya Islami nist diga, Gina, I need my.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Oh, you're waiting. What? You give me the proper.
Okay, in 10 words or fewer, Tavi describes herself as.
Ridiculously excited for the Taddy bar.
Oh! That's a good one. Thank you. All right, so did I forget anything else? Can I know? Okay. All right, I'm going to ask a question to all of you. Please answer. It doesn't have to be very long. And in what ways are you familiar, similar to, and different from your mothers?
Them's fighting words.
Them's fighting words, especially since the mothers are in the audience. Wow. In what ways are you similar to and different from your mothers?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Well, I am so blessed and honored to have the most amazing mother in the world, the most supportive mom, in a time that she deserves. I think all mothers, seriously, they're all our sheroes. In a time where I was growing up in LA, girls didn't go away to college. Thank you.
Sorry.
Is this okay? Oh yeah, this is better, yeah? Okay. Women didn't go away to college. Women, they had to stay home. My mother was very supportive of me going to Berkeley, to Harvard, pursuing something that wasn't traditional. So in what way am I similar to my mother? I hope to God I learned how to love like my mom, and I learned how to be empathetic like my mother. And how am I different is,
I'm lucky that I'm growing up. I mean, look, there's benefits of being here and there's benefits if we were in Iran. I'm lucky I'm growing up in America where, as an Iranian Jewish woman, I have all the opportunities available to me that men have, and that I could be a professor, I could be a writer, I could be an advocate, and it's not something that's looked down upon, or it's not something that people look at and say, but who's gonna marry her, or something like that. So it's not that I'm different than my mom, it's more that I have opportunities that I think my mother's generation and the generation before her did not have.
So, first of all, since these are my official words and they don't have anything to do with Taddy, oh no. Is it working now? Okay, great. So first of all, since these are my first non-Taddig related words of the night, I want to say, Gina, congratulations. This is amazing. And I want to say, where's Lisa? I think it turned off. No, Lisa, my love. I want you to know Lisa Ansel, the Associate Director of the Kazan Institute. I've known her for decades. And she's Ashkenazi, she speaks better Persian than half of the room here. And I've been waiting since the summer to tell you, Lisa, my love, Lisa June, tashakkur bara hame zahmatet. Really and truly, I mean it. It's so interesting. You would think that someone like me who's sitting here, who has that master's degree, who is blessed to be a weekly columnist for the Jewish Journal, you would think that I would say I have so many more opportunities than my mother. But I actually want to tell you that in many ways I feel less fortunate than her. And let me tell you why. I was born literally, not figuratively, into the hijab because I was born in the 1980s after the revolution. My mother was born in a time which was the golden age of the Jews. And whereas I was born into the hijab and never knew anything different, whereas I was she had her own trauma from the Iran-Iraq war, but I was a little girl and I had mine too. My mom last year looked at me while I was busy cooking in the kitchen and she said, Tabassum, which is my full Persian name, which I don't use here because everybody butchers it. She said, Tabassum. I'll translate for you. She said, when I was your age, I didn't have leg pain like you. I didn't have foot pain like you. You're telling me you have all of these aches and pains. I never had that when I was your age. And here's someone who, by the way, had to ride the bus every day in Iran, didn't have a minivan like me and Costco and so on. And she was going into ration lines at 5 a.m. because it was the Iran-Iraq war. And why did she say this to me? And this is what I'll wrap up with this answer. I realized it. My mother had the one thing I don't have here in America, which is that when she was my age, she had an amazing support system of other women. Every day in that house in Tehran, every khale, every amme, which are maternal and paternal grandparents, aunts, grandmothers. I don't have any. I don't have any khale. It was all zandai and all of this. They would come over. And I remember my sister and I were raised by my mother and other women. So I will tell you that how am I different from my mom, Gina? I'm not better. I actually don't mean to sound like an ingrate, but I actually don't know how much more fortunate than I am, because here she is, every day she makes time to call her friends. She checks in, as we kind of say in Persian, like mardom dari, you know? She still has her network. She still talks to my zanamu back in Iran. Whereas I am experiencing the minivans and the Costco's and everything else, but guess what? In this country, I'm free, but I'm lonely. And she actually did not experience that. And that is the biggest difference between me and my mother.
I would say the difference is that my mother has. Can you hear me? I would say the difference is that my mother has way more courage than I do. And, you know, they share so many stories about when they arrived from Iran to Israel, and then from Israel to New York, and then from New York to Los Angeles. And I'm thinking, God, how many trips did my poor parents take just for the sake of freedom? And they share stories about how when they arrived to New York, my mom would sit down and translate everything, because my dad had to go back to school to get licensed in New York. And she would translate everything into Farsi and then translate it back for him into English, so he would be able to grasp everything in its entirety and to be able to pass his boards. As well as she would just take my brother out for endless hours in the freezing cold, so my dad would have quiet time to study and pass his boards. And the level of sacrifice and courage that she displayed for us and showed to us is something that I could only aspire to.
So how am I similar to my mom? First of all, I want to say that I'm very, very lucky. I'm blessed with the best mom. Not only amazing inside and out, but she has really been a role model for me in so many ways and continues to inspire me. And I'm grateful to her for everything I have. And also, I think what's similar is that I aspire to be like her and be courageous of her. I'm in awe of her courage and her ability to, you know, take on any challenge and do it so effortlessly. But I think what's different is probably just life experiences. We have a lot more opportunities and the ability to live life in different ways than our parents did. But even in that, I see myself thinking what my mom would do, my grandparents. I come from a line of very strong, very smart, amazing women. And so I'm incredibly blessed. I think I have a piece of all of them in me, and all of the direction I've taken in my life has been inspired by their strength and their encouragement and their endless support. So I'm incredibly blessed.
Thank you. So I want to pivot for a minute, and then we'll come back to this theme. I want to pivot for a minute and jump on something that Sabo mentioned, the matter of anti-Semitism in academia. You've written about that, and we've had conversations in which you've mentioned all this. Can you talk about that a little bit and tell us what your own experience has been?
Sure. So, oh yeah, sorry. So I got my PhD in religious studies, and I taught at three different universities in Los Angeles, and I left in 2017 specifically for what you saw in the congressional hearings. So I saw the writing on the wall with anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism on college campuses for 20 plus years, and by 2017 I had enough of it, and because I didn't have tenure, I wasn't protected. I was still a visiting professor, which is what they do in universities, so they don't have to pay you full, you know, it's a horrible system, it's very degrading. And so I didn't have protection, and I knew in 2017, I knew I need to get out of this system, because if I don't get out, they're going to get me out, because I believe in Israel's right to exist. And thank you. And the sad part is this isn't even something that anyone should be applauding over. It's a nation state like any other nation state. So any nation state has a right to exist. And so I got very lucky. I landed in a really wonderful place, American Jewish Committee. It's the oldest Jewish human rights organization in America. And now I have the opportunity to be able to teach anti-Semitism. The reason why I really left was I was teaching at one university where the students were coming to me and saying, Professor Sumech, so-and-so professor in Middle Eastern history keeps saying to us that Israel doesn't have a right to exist. Israel's a white settler colonialist state. You need to do something. And I said, I don't have the power to do anything. I'm a visiting professor of 10 years at this university. You all pay $50,000 a year plus to go to this university. You actually have more power than I do. But I did go to the director of the Jewish Studies Center and I said, this is what's going on. She said, if I raise money for you, will you be able to teach a course on modern Israel? And I said, absolutely. We raised money in a heartbeat, but the history department would not let me teach it because I have a PhD in the history of religions and it's not legitimate. It was ridiculous. There was no reason for me to not be able to teach that course. Poli-sci took it. I taught it in poli-sci. This teacher kept writing things in the school newspaper against Israel, and I kept refuting her anti-Zionist ideology. And she had tenure, and I did not, and she found ways to make sure I never taught another course there again. So that was my experience in academia. So I knew that was what was going on. The irony is that now I'm at American Jewish Committee, where my position is I literally sit with corporations, and thank God because of Zoom, I don't have to travel all over the world. Everyone's on this Zoom, where I will have thousands of people from major, huge organizations where I teach them about anti-Semitism, where I teach them about anti-Semitic tropes, how they're being recycled today, and I teach them about what is legitimate criticism of Israel, because like any other nation state, you could have legitimate criticism, and when does that criticism become anti-Semitic? And the irony is that this teacher shut my voice down from teaching 30 students a year, and now I have the opportunity to literally teach thousands and thousands of people every single day, some of the top CEOs, people in the NBA, et cetera. So one door closes, another one opens, and she tried to shut my voice, and if it only expanded my opportunity to be able to advocate for Israel and the Jewish community.
By the way, you guys, if you want to make any comments, please feel free to jump in and don't let me hold.
I don't think you wanted to hear the comment. She just
Oh.
That was the expletive in Persian.
Yeah. You want to translate the Persian expletive to an English expletive?
Since Gina's pressing me, I just turned to my dear friend Saba regarding the other professor at UCLA and said
It was at UCLA.
At wherever university it was, actually, it was my subconscious that said UCLA. I associate you with her, and I said those eternal Persian words, Zahremar.
What does it mean?
It means may snake venom go down your throat so you shut your trap.
So, well, you're on a roll, Tavi. So you do pro-Israel advocacy in that area. I think certain fissures have developed within the Israeli nation state, the people in Israel, and also within among American Jews, and those differences usually follow along more secular versus more religious communities. You worked through the Mar Fellowship with a lot of young Iranian Jews. Is it your experience that the same fissures exist within that group, or are we immune to that?
You mean more secular versus religious?
Is there a divide within the Iranian Jewish youth in this town, at least?
Among specifically Zionism, right? About Zionism.
No, in general, matters of worldview. More recently, opinions about the war and so on, but in general.
Yeah. This is such a fascinating question because, as Gina mentioned, I was a co-founder of 30 Years After, along with Sam Yebri and many other wonderful friends in 2007, 2008. And then years later, when Oren Maher, wonderful community leader and philanthropist, came along and founded the Maher Fellowship, it was the country's first ever young leadership training program for Iranian American Jews, for young ones, for young professionals. And I'll never forget the first cohort. We've had many, and I've led 3 of them so far. You had, and I'll use them sort of as a microcosm of the greater young Persian American community here, Persian Jewish American community. You had a couple of your diehard right-wingers, the people for whom even years after Bibi Netanyahu had his controversies and so on, on the Israel side were still very, very much pro him and his government. And then you had 1 or 2 maybe to the far left of those young professionals that I met. And by far left, I mean that they were really, this was years after President Obama came, but they were, let's say, really diehard for President Obama, and really, really, really anti-Trump. And, 1 or 2 who would maybe attend, rallies in Washington, D.C. And then on the Israel side, it was so fascinating. It was so fascinating. I think I took for granted growing up in LA in the 90s that most young Iranian American Jews would be almost, let's say, sort of unconditionally Zionist, right? Whether they were secular or whether they were religious, it was just because it's part and parcel of our history and our trauma, as well as our yearnings and our dreams of, 2,600 years to turn towards Zion, to turn towards Jerusalem. And I saw it a lot more back then, around 2014, or I saw it a lot less, back then around 2014. And over the years, I've seen more and more of it. And what I'm referring to specifically is the fact that I don't know that you can, I don't know if you can say any longer that most or all young Iranian American Jews, I'll take the case of Israel, for example, support Israel to the degree that I think my generation did, and certainly know as much as my generation that grew up in the 90s did. There are a lot of different factors for that, but I always say about our community that we know where trends will go with us because of the Ashkenazim. The Ashkenazim over 100 years ago in America, it's a blessing for us, but it also really helps us look into the future. We actually can really look and see where our community is headed because we had an immigrant Jewish community already come by the masses here. And so I wouldn't be surprised if right now, especially during this particular war, yes, it's ignited a lot of Zionism and certainly pro-Jewish pride in our youth, but I also think after that this war ends and in the years that move on, if I was heading 30 years after again, if I was in charge of another organization working with young Iranian American Jews, I would no longer assume to know their feelings about Israel, their feelings about American candidates, from local elections all the way up to the presidency. And you just sort of have to work with that and pivot with that, never shove your opinion down someone else's throat for it. So I'm sorry, I was the long-winded.
Okay, let me ask you, Jasmine. In Israel, I assume people don't have to worry about anti-Semitism so much, but that doesn't mean that Israel is a country free of prejudice, right? What did you observe as a single young woman in Israel in terms of divisions along ethnic lines, race lines, secular versus conservative versus orthodox lines?
I'll just say recently, actually, I came back on October 6th. So I was there with my family, with my 2 daughters and my husband, and we were there for a month. And what I noticed actually wasn't so much division between Sephardi and Ashkenaz, or what I noticed more was the division in terms of politics, the divisiveness. And it was really sad to see it. Of course, it's a democracy, everyone is free to express themselves, but it was almost had, I never once wanted to ever leave Israel, but after 2 weeks of being there, both my husband and I said, maybe we should just cut our trip short. But we didn't. We came back on the 6th, thankfully. We got very lucky. But what happened was that we saw so much division between parents and children. They weren't speaking for a year, 2 years, all because of division in terms of politics. Also, in the city where my husband's parents live, the rallies or protests had gotten so heated that they had passed an ordinance forbidding children to come to the rallies because of possible violence between Israelis and the division.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for Tina, speaking of raising children. What do you say to parents of young children who ask you, how do we raise financially savvy, smart businesswomen who are at the same time ethical people and who philanthropists, but for the right reasons?
Yeah, so as far as financial education, which is what we do, we make it simple and visual, easier to understand, less intimidating. So it's never too early to start. So surprisingly, in the US, rarely do kids have a financial education course in school, which is shocking. So most of the time people learn from their parents or from friends, which is, you know, another reason why it's best to start early on, and it can be very basic things from budgeting, saving, so on. What's interesting is that we do educational content for elementary school kids in classrooms, and we've also created content for AERP. It's the same exact content. It's very basic, visual. So either people learn it early on or you're forced to learn it later in life. So I think financial education is very important early on. The other thing I would say for parents to help their kids with is having an entrepreneurial spirit. So fostering a spirit of entrepreneurship where you're able to take risks and to fail well and learn from your failures, I think is, you know, part of resilience, which is really important for children, and really key for them learning that life is, you know, especially financially, people go through ups and downs. Another aspect I would say that's really important is who you surround your kids with. You know, they say that you're the sum of the 5 or 6 people you hang around with. And so those people, especially when it comes to financial education and being successful adults, are the key to opening up your network to opportunities, ideas, and so on. So it's very powerful for parents to provide that for their kids, which I think actually the Jewish community does very well, especially the Iranian community. The other thing I would say is promoting personal fulfillment is very important. So not just gaining monetary assets, but fulfilling your dreams and passions and having a very creative mindset. Because again, I think we live in a world where there's a lot of instant gratification, and people think, you know, when they grow up or start a business overnight, they have success. And I think that's what you see in social media. And so I think one of the most important things is being aware that, you know, it's important to make decisions for your life that are not just about making money and keeping up with, you know, the rest of the community. The last thing I'll say that to address your point is I think giving back is very important, because, you know, your wealth is your relationships, your connection with your community. It's also what you can give back to the world. And so philanthropy, I think, is a really powerful and meaningful way to do that and to build success. But also, I think for parents to teach their kids that you can be a philanthropist at any age. So you don't need a certain status or net worth or age. You can start giving, whether it's money or your time or your skills or resources. And I would say, going again back to parents, I think one really interesting thing is that kids learn by or follow parents, and they learn the best by observing them. So leading by example of, being financially responsible, having good financial habits, and also making ethical decisions. So you can give them positive impact for them to follow.
I think within our community, at least, there's a lot of pressure on young people to live up to a certain standard of success. And there's a word in Farsi called zarang, which literally means to be savvy or a capable person, but usually it's used in the context of being able to pull one over on the next person. Not exactly unethical, but you go as far to that line as possible. So you talk about learning by example and setting that example for your children. How do you teach children that they can become financially successful without being zarang? And is it okay? Is it okay not to be that financially successful?
Yeah, I think, it's extremely challenging when you live in Los Angeles. And again, I think for younger people, our generation didn't have Instagram. But I think right now what you see the highlights of people's lives. You see the highlights socially, you see the highlights financially, and a lot of it isn't real. And I think the one thing that's really important to teach children is that, that money can buy certain things, but I think, finding meaningfulness in life, finding purpose and that community and finding things that matter to you is so much more rewarding and important. And the truth is, we work with a lot of, banks, we work with high net worth individuals, and there are so many issues that people have in their lives that you don't realize. And I think if there was one thing I wish people could do is go, understand behind the scenes what really it takes, especially, a lot of very high performing, successful people, there are always sacrifices along the way. And, you just never know what goes into someone reaching their goals or being hustling or being zarang. So I think, encouraging children not just to, make it, but also find where meaning is important to them. I mentioned finding personal fulfillment because I think, again, as I mentioned before, it's hard. Everything you do is hard. If you want to be a doctor or a lawyer, start a business, start a tech company. But if you're doing it solely for the purpose of making money, it's going to be extremely difficult. And I think, again, people have to find what makes them excited and happy in life and what they're willing to give up for it.
Definitely. Saba, you wrote in 2020, I think in the Jewish Journal, a really good article in which you talked about all the great things about our community, our closeness, the fact that we kiss 300 people when we go into a party, and then an hour later we kiss those same 300 people when we're leaving the party. And this was we were still in COVID times, and you predicted that, or you wondered whether we as a people would change a whole lot as a result of COVID and everything that happened. What do you think? How have we changed, or have we changed at all? Have we reverted back?
I think there's times where we revert back. Remember that feeling when COVID was kind of done and everyone started hanging out and socializing, and just the thrill of being able to have the Shabbat dinners together and seeing each other and how wonderful that was. And I think just as human beings, we begin to take our moments and our people for granted. So I think if we could see this silver lining within COVID, God willing, no one lost close people, but it was to recognize how important that familial relationship was, the relationships we have with each other and our community. We would never have been able to do this otherwise. And so I think one of the beauties and the blessings that we have to walk away from that is to really appreciate each other and how fleeting time is with each other. And how grateful we are for this community. It's insular, which could be really suffocating, and it's insular, which could be really liberating and supportive. And I think, people really realized how much they depended on their community and family during COVID.
Tabby, well, I have one question that I have to pose before we run out of time. So I really have to read this and ask you. I know we're sort of like jumping all over the place, but listen to this. So she has an advice column, and this is one reader's question. Please, somebody tape this because I want my daughter to hear this too, because she complains about this every day. It feels like every day my husband gets to watch TV or take a nap whenever he wants without disruption. He's excused from bedtime because both kids, including our newborn, need me, apparently. When I asked my daughter why she doesn't wake her dad up when she needs something, when I'm also very much asleep, she said, because dad is sleeping. So, how did you answer this poor individual?
So Gina's referring to a somewhat useless advice column I have in the Jewish Journal, which is new, called Dear Tabby. There'll be a Purim edition of it next week, where I offer mostly useless responses to reader questions. First of all, I would tell you that if I had some secret for getting men, especially, God bless them, Persian men, to assume more responsibility around the house, I would be one of Tina's clients, okay? Because I would have serious dough. You should know I know the identities of the people asking the questions, but I don't reveal them in the advice column. She is a Persian girl married to an Ashkenazi man, and that really surprised me. You should know, for whatever, Ashkenazim here in the audience think they know about Persians, we also have a set of, beliefs that we believe about you. And we believe that if we marry an Ashkenazi here, we might be able to do less work around the house. Right? And so I felt for her really on a double level, right? I wish I knew what I responded to her. I think, first of all, it is so liberating, and I really do use that word carefully. Not therapeutic, not helpful. It is actually liberating sometimes that to be in her position, and that this is some advice I may have given, is to not jump to a conclusion about someone's intentions, but to be very realistic about their capabilities. Okay? I am telling you, really from personal experience, the bane of my existence has often been the trash can. Certainly when I was pregnant, it was so heavy for me, I couldn't, throw it out and so on. And I remember when I was judging my husband's intentions about it, walking past this loaded trash can every day, where oftentimes more trash would be placed on top of it rather than inside of it, just like the laundry bin. I don't understand. Why don't they just, okay. Thank you. No. I will tell you that there was a time personally when I used to judge the intentions, and I used to say, he takes me for granted, and his intentions are really to make me feel taken for granted and so on, and these are all of these intentions, ABC. And then when I stepped back and I realized the actual truth, which was we were very, very different. I was very visual, perhaps he wasn't, and he actually wasn't seeing that full trash can walking by. It's liberating. Her husband, was not able to put her kids to bed. That wasn't his strong suit, but she later admitted to me after that they love playing with him, and they have more even fun. They really let loose with him. So again, I really believe more than anything,
give up on the...
I'll tell you, I really believe more than anything, expectations kill. And that would be my biggest, piece of that formula.
Okay. All right. I got the 15-minute signal, so we're gonna jump to another question. Ashkenazi versus Sephardic versus Mizrahi. We have this idea in LA, certain idea of what Israeli women are like. And, do you want to marry an Israeli girl, or is she going to be a ball buster, or do you want to, are they, is that a fair stereotype?
I'll answer regarding both men and women, since I'm married to a man. It's an interesting question. So in Tel Aviv, there's the Shuk, the Carmel Shuk, which is the street market. And nearby, there's a graffiti mural of two cacti bandits. And they're wearing a cowboy hat, and they have the red bandana of a cowboy, and below their legs is a sign, a Tel Aviv sign. And they're pointing their pistols at each other. So clearly they're in a showdown. And I believe that when I'd seen it so many times, and finally I just, okay, I get it. The meaning, I think, behind that was that what the artist was trying to tell anyone passing by was, forget about John Wayne, forget about Dirty Harry, forget about any Western movie you may have seen in your lifetime, because here, Israel, that's the real wild, wild west. And so my initial impression of Israeli women and men was, strong, confident, tough, sometimes difficult, was accurate, because you need those skills to survive in the wild, wild west. And through time living there, I learned about the Hebrew word sabra, which is the prickly, the fruit of the cactus, the prickly pear fruit of the cactus. And it's also become a nickname for Israeli Jews that were born in Israel. And just like the sabra plant, the Israelis from the outside, they're tough, they're prickly, but in the inside, they're soft and sweet. And it's no coincidence that when you look back at the mural, you understand why he chose two cacti representing the sabra plant, and not just two Israeli guys or a woman and a man fighting. And in my book, I shared stories about the more tough side of Israelis. And I'm happy to share just really quickly one story. And I tried to do it with humor, obviously. It was my first night in my new, beautiful, brand new apartment in Tel Aviv, and I was taking a shower, and suddenly I heard a large blast. And I step out, and very soon I realized that my water heater had exploded, and within seconds, my entire apartment is flooded with water. And so I call my landlord, Svika, and he arrives at a drop of a dime. And when he arrives, he tells me that your water heater exploded because I take very long showers. And he then tells me that his showers take only 7 minutes because he washes his hair and his body at the same time. And he proceeded to do one of these. Literally one of these. And then he shared his bright idea to tell me to go join Gordon Gym, which is the equivalent of Equinox, because that's where he goes to take his long showers. So, it takes a while, but you get to eventually see their soft and sweet side.
Well, you were there 2 years. Did you ever see the soft and sweet side?
I married one. So.
Well, no, Okay, Tina, I think I'll stop with this question for Tina. You got to be honest. Are men generally better at money than women? Okay, come on. You know,
Actually, I think it's interesting because studies show that women are better investors than men.
really?
Yes, women have better returns over the long term than men do because they don't take as many risks. But I think that's investing. I think the problem for women is that they don't take risks. So they're less willing to, and women have a lot of issues when it comes to money. So they have a longer life, they're caregivers, they have kids, they take time off. There's a gender gap in pay, so they're never getting paid as much usually. So there are a lot of challenges that women have, but when they measured actual results, women do much better. They're more careful, they do their research. So I think that's a really interesting way to think of things. But as I mentioned before, if you're not taking risks, like if I asked everyone in the audience who invested in Bitcoin, I would bet that, you know, the majority of men have probably invested in some kind of like cryptocurrency, and more women are risk averse, and they probably wouldn't take that, you know, initiative to do that. And so I think as women, we miss out on opportunities. So I think that's the big advantage, but I think that's changing over time when you have more women in leadership positions who are aware of hiring women, giving them better maternity leave, making sure that they have access to opportunities within the companies to you know, reach certain levels that in the past have been more difficult. So I would say to answer your question, I do think women are actually better and this is proven with research that women are better investors.
We're also better at spending it. Okay, I'm going to ask for questions. Please, Lisa will walk around with the mic, so put your hand up and say whom the question is directed to.
Okay, my name is Sam, and just for the records, I'm non-Jewish, but I'm interested in Jewish history. My question is, somebody mentioned about Esther, and then she talked to a king, a Persian king. Can anybody elaborate the name of that king, please?
Saba is our expert.
Oh, no, it's just Achashverosh. Achashverosh. It's in the book of Esther.
So is it Cyrus the Great?
No, this is before. This is after.
And just for the sake of Tina, I want to kind of give you a fun fact that the greatest generous person in history who has done most philanthropy has got Iranian roots. And the encyclopedia says that he has distributed, you know, interpreted in today's inflation terms, $102.2 billion. He stands at the top, even more than Warren.
Of his own money or somebody else's money?
No, he's Mr. Jamshedji Tata. They founded the Tata Industries.
Tata, Zoroastrians. They're
oh.
Parsis in India,
but they're
in
Indian.
Mumbai.
He belongs to my community.
Yes,
wow.
the Mumbai Parsi community.
Thank you.
My name is David. I'm a former Israeli soldier. And what I'd like to ask you, practically all of you, what can you possibly say or do about the family unit? Do I need to explain that?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that just a simple example of sending your kid to a faraway university and have him come home once a year or twice a year just to visit, it takes away from the actual family unit being together. I'm not against it, but that's one example how families just separate from each other. And not only that, the usual...
Let me just rephrase. So you're saying that you feel that our community is letting those ties fray over time?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Shabbat dinners, for example, are almost non-existent.
Oh my God, I don't know where you're living, but come to my neighborhood.
We have Shabbat dinners in our family and most of our extended family. But my children have friends, and those friends do not. A lot of them do not have family dinners. They don't stay at Shabbat.
Okay, let's see what happening. Thank you.
So it's interesting you said that. First of all, thank you for your service. And I mean that. It's interesting you said that because my first instinctive reaction was that Judaism has a built-in system for maintaining the family unit. And it's a few things. One of them is, as much as possible, that we should try to honor our mother and our father. And now that I'm older, I can really, and have my own kids, I can appreciate that more than ever. But for me, as a Persian Jew, whether in Tehran or in LA, the biggest built-in system of Judaism for family cohesion is Shabbat. And we say, as much as the Jews have kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept the Jews. I will tell you, though, Shabbat is not like the way it used to be. When I was a kid, yes, we grew up sort of traditional, non-Orthodox. We were there. Our behinds were always at the Shabbat table as kids, and the Laker game was on. But today, what you see and wherever I go, I see the same thing, whether at the weddings, at the Brit Milas, at the Shabbat dinners, at the Yom Kippur services. You've got our generation, like any other youth generation, with a device in their hands. And so whereas I grew up with the Laker game in the background, but the TV, the TV was there, but we were surrounded by family and we were talking to each other. And yeah, we had to listen to the adult conversations too. That to me was some of the greatest times I ever spent with my cousins and my elders and my aunts and my uncles. And now you come to a lot of the, non-Orthodox Shabbat tables anywhere, around this country, especially for the Persian Jews, and they're there, they've said their Kiddush and their Hamotzi, but every member of that family has a device in their hands. So if you ask me, take it away, at least at the Shabbat table. Even if you're going to pose a picture of the beautiful fesenjoon and tadig that your mother made, she doesn't need it. She needs you at that table, right? Persian Jews and their Shabbat, their Friday night Shabbat traditions are basic. I'm telling you, it is honestly one of my favorite parts of being an Iranian Jew. And I hope we don't lose that. The friends of your kids, they're Persian, the ones who are not showing up anymore? That's so sad.
Well, invite them over. Yeah? Yeah? Lisa Disley. Oh, sorry.
Yeah? Can I? Okay. So I'm looking at the people who are here, and I don't see many of the millennial generation here. We do have, but not many. And I'm getting concerned about, as the parents, we are all working so hard. We have all, I believe, have wonderful, educated children, independent, working. But as the parents, how can we get the next generation involved in the Iranian Jewish community, as much as they also want to connect to other nationalities and religion and have relationship with them? But I feel like somehow, as much as we are giving the best to them, we are not getting them involved in our community. And what are your suggestions in doing that?
Can I answer that one? And this goes to a question that you were going to ask, and this has to do with education. And I think one of the biggest issues that we have is that courses like mine and other courses on Iranian Jewish history are not valued in academia. And it's what we refer to as Ashken normative. It's an Ashkenazi-based Jewish education. So whether it is at Jewish day schools when they're younger, or whether it is in universities, where I was teaching at another university that has the largest Iranian Jewish community, and they cut all of my classes because they had one person already teaching on Iranian Jews. And this was in Jewish studies. And so this is what we refer to as being a very Ashken normative. It's all Ashkenazi based. So I think one of the biggest issues is that You don't, even Jewish studies departments don't value the Mizrahi narrative. I mean, how many people grew up understanding and learning the ethnic cleansing of the Mizrahi community? How many people learned about the Farhud, where literally a Nazi-style pogrom took place in Baghdad in 1941 and literally kicked out every single Jew out of Baghdad. You used to have 100,000 Jews living in Egypt. Today you have 3, but we don't learn that history. And so I think number one is teaching that history. And if we should demand it of our Jewish day schools, we should also demand it from our departments and universities. And we should also be able to teach it to our kids. And I think there's also that oral narrative of being able to make sure that you talk to them about what it was like growing up in Iran, the hardships, what it wasn't, what being najas meant, what living in the mahalleh, etc. So they really take pride in their history, because we've survived 2,700 years, but most people don't even know that, especially Iranian Jewish kids.
This is one reason, I'm not just trying to put a plug in here, but one reason that I appreciate the Kazan Institute so much, that they are not guilty of this. If anything, they have always been interested in Jews of different places. And so,
the Kazan put together a book called Sephardi and Mizrahi Jews in America. Gina and I wrote for that book because they acknowledged and they recognized the importance of the Mizrahi community. And I think and I hope other Jewish studies departments, centers, etc., look to the Kazan as a paragon to emulate because of that.
also, sorry. No, go ahead. I'm not being facetious at all, but where's that lady? I think if you have Tina and her organization have seminars, educational seminars for the young people, they will all come in droves, and that may be a very good way to bring them all together and bind them, because it's something that most of the millennials have in common, this desire to become financially successful.
And I want to add something, which is that, look, we are going to lose some of them in our community. We are. And to think that we're not is dangerous and short-sighted. You know, I can't sleep at night for a lot of reasons having to do with October 7th, the hostages, the soldiers, how many Palestinians have been fanaticized beginning now and moving into the future. But I'll tell you something else that keeps me up at night, that I actually really do worry about the Jewish community here and around the world, is, you know what I think is happening to us after October 7th? I think we're really on the defensive, and so much of our Jewish pride has come out, but you see, so much of our Jewish pride has come out because we're literally under attack. I call this Jews being anti-Semitism. It can work in the short term. It can get a college student who would have never worn a Magen David before to wear it. But what about October 7th, 2025, and 2026, and 2030, and so on? So I really hope that as collective Jewry, we pause and we say, we have to be very careful not to be so anti-Semitism that there's no room for pro-Semitism, right? And what does it look to be pro-Semitic? It means you bring so much joy to any children, not your own, anyone around you, younger generations, older generations, college students and infants alike, right? You come to my house on a Friday, that house smells good, no matter what I've done, whether I've done takeout or anything else, because you know what it is? It's the smell of Shabbat, and it's a joy of Shabbat. My 6-year-old runs around, he goes, Mama, because that's what his voice actually sounds like. He goes, Mama, my favorite Jewish holiday is guess. And I entertain him and I go, Purim, Pesach, and he goes, no, my favorite Jewish holiday is Shabbat. Why? Because I try to create an experience in that house where I don't care if in my case, we keep the laws of Shabbat. I don't care what you do. I don't care what you observe for it. Make it smell good. Make it taste good. Make it feel good. Be pro-Semitic in your lives. And by the way, with that in mind, I want to say that my editor-in-chief, the legendary David Suissa, is right there. So if you like my writing, you go ahead and talk to him. And if you don't, you go ahead and enjoy your tadig and dignity.
Hello, hi. Thank you so much for everybody. So informative, and also a former Israeli soldier.
Woo!
I just said it because that you will not be alone, you know. I was born in Iran before the revolution, went through the revolution, the war, escaped to Israel. I lived in Israel for many years, and then I moved here. So it's a lot of the back and forth over there. It's very familiar. And I would like kind of to address a lot of things here. When my kids were growing up, they're kind of big now, besides one of them that she's still young. We had one of the organizations, which was with Mr. David, who he passed away. And he did it, he had in his office a big picture of all the people who they came from Europe. And it was about 100 of them. And from these 100 people, only 2 of them remained Jewish, because they all had those mixed marriages and stuff like that. So he continued just to give and make sure that the children are getting connected and having connections to the Judaism. The other thing I want to say that she mentioned, I'm sorry, I'm bad with names, is that the support system we had in Iran, or even in Israel, which it was the family, the aunts, and everybody, they were all together, because it takes a village. And we learn also from our aunts, and we learn even from our neighbors. We learn from our village a lot of things. One mother can have
Wait,
so many
do you have a question?
Yes, I do have a question.
Okay, can you get to the question?
Right. And is that how the Persian Jewish, which I'm part of, stop being afraid to take stand? Because I feel a lot of times they will not take a stand. And I don't think we're in a position that we can be afraid anymore.
Stand on what?
Under political views, under Zionism. I feel that they are hiding.
If I could politely disagree, I think, and I'm so proud of our Iranian Jewish young adults, because they're the ones who are on the forefront of the Hillels on college campuses, of Bruins for Israel, Trojans for Israel, etc. So I see them being great leaders at a time when it's not easy to be a leader in the Jewish community and to be a Zionist in the Jewish community. So I really, really commend the young adults in our community, because they are doing amazing, amazing work. So if you go on college campuses, you will see how vocal they are and how supportive they are, and with their writings, with whether they're working with other Jewish nonprofits. So I really commend our community, because they're not afraid, and it's a really scary time. So. Well, it just depends on what your algorithm is feeding you, or what newspaper you're reading, or how in tune you are with academia. You know, if you want to see some young Iranian Jews doing great work, go follow Stand With Us, go follow AJC, go follow ADL. You will see how these young adults are there and they're really showing up.
Go on Yom Ha'atzmaut this spring. Just take a day off, make a day of it. Go to UCLA and maybe go to USC you will just be amazed at what they're doing. Take it from me, I was a pro-Israel campus leader. I've really seen it all. I've been chased out of rooms for my own safety. One Yom Ha'atzmaut, I served as the back because I couldn't get the front. It was a two-person costume of a camel costume, walking around UCS San Diego's library walk, trying to get
Tabby, come back,
cake.
come back.
Yeah. Saba's right about what she's saying. Go to UCLA on Yom Ha'atzmaut. Find out when they're doing it.
Follow Hillel. You'll see these students really doing amazing
we have
work.
one other question, or is this the last question? One more.
Hi, thank you, Sean Landris. I can't help but reflect that 40 years ago, I was a Hebrew school student here at Sinai, just as the first wave, not the 1950s wave, but the post-revolution wave of Iranian Jews was arriving in Los Angeles, and what a different place this community is than it was 40 years ago. So, and maybe this is a good final question. I would love to hear, as many of you who are willing, reflect on how the Iranian Jewish community has transformed the Los Angeles Jewish community and the American Jewish community. You've spent so much talking about the extraordinary wealth of the Iranian Jewish community, cultural wealth, spiritual wealth, but you've also transformed us all, and not just because I'm also looking forward to the Tanig Bar. Talk a little bit about that. How, from your perspective, how has this community transformed all of us?
This is great. I think we would love to hear from each one of you. If I may go first, there's a really good book on the subject. It's called The Luminous Heart of Jonah S. You should look it up, you should buy it, and you should read it.
I'll just make it short. I think we've helped the Ashkenazi community go back to their roots and remind yourselves of who you are and to be proud as Jews. Because I learned many lessons from my father, but one lesson that's always stood out to me is to be a proud Jew, because that's the first thing that the world is going to try to take away from you. So I think that's one thing that we've maybe bestowed upon the Ashkenazi community.
I agree, and I'll add quickly that I think it was someone else's question about the Shabbat dinners. I think one of the things that I think Iranian or Jews have done is inspire a lot more people to do things like celebrate Shabbat and really rally around the community and embrace a lot of traditions, not in a religious way necessarily, but more traditional Judaism that brings you closer to your family and your and just gives you more meaning.
I concur with both, and I think, Sean, it's a great question. I think it's also reminding the Ashkenazi community of the diversity, of how religiously diverse and culturally diverse the Jewish community is, because we forget that there are just within the Mizrahi community, we're so diverse. 10 to 15% of Jews in America identify with being African-American Jews, and we forget to see how diverse the community is and to celebrate that diversity.
That's such a great question, Sean. You're sitting and hearing the answer of this here at Sinai Temple right now. I remember years ago, a senior Sinai leader told me, he said, Tabby, you weren't around, but in 50 years ago, and back then it was 40 years ago in the 70s, even a place like Sinai Temple, so much of the young Ashkenazi members and leaders had left. And this was this person's words, not mine, that really when you went out to Shabbat services on a Saturday, you just saw a lot of sort of old Ashkenazi men. And they were worried. They were very worried. So it is with no exaggeration that I say that Persian Jewry, I believe, partly saved Judaism in the city, if at the very least revitalized it. I sort of see it that before we came here, there was a lot of oi in Judaism, and I like to think we added the joy in Judaism. And by the way, Gina wrote a spectacular essay on this. Was it the foreword? I think it was the foreword, specifically about what Persian Jews have done. She went to the levels of supermarkets, up to the cultural centers and the synagogues and the schools and everywhere. So I'm really proud of what we've done.
Also, honest to God, we made it a much better dressed town.
We did. We taught people that they don't necessarily have to stand in line just because 5 other people are standing in line. You should at least find out why they're standing in line, right? We taught them that it's okay to ask for your coffee as extra hot, no foam, 2%, no, all of those things. We're a little bit demanding when it comes to some of our purchases and orders. And overall, I always say this, I came here 2 years before the revolution, and the Rodeo Drive was one Hawaiian restaurant called the Luau on one side, and on the other side there was this little Swiss chalet kind of place that that Americans were so proud of. And as soon as Iranians came, with all the food and all the desire to go out and eat and dress up and party, catering companies came out, restaurants came out. Basically, we rebuilt this city from rock and roll. What was that song? Oh, okay. Boss Lisa says it's over. Thank you guys for your patience, for being here. Thank you to the panelists.
Before I thank everyone, I just a piece of information for all of you for our Kazan Institute. We actually have a volume that Saba edited on Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews that you can all, we have gone to we publish every year something called the Kazan Annual on various topics in Jewish life and Jewish history. We have that volume that Saba edited, that Gina wrote in. You can get it, you can download it for free. If you, one of two things, if you can remember Purdue University Press, go there and just type in Kazan Annual or type in Sephardic Jews. Out will come the volume, you can download it, and in December, David Myers from UCLA is editing a volume on Haredi Jews. It'll be the first volume that I'm aware of in the United States ever to have a series of essays on the history of Haredi Jews. And if you forget all of this, if you can remember my name, Steve Ross, I teach at USC, just send me an email and I'll send you the links for everything so you don't have to worry about it. I want to thank, I know it gets confusing, right? But S.J. Ross, like my real name is Ross, right? Rosenwax. But it's worth saying a moment. I was born Stephen Rosenwax, talking about anti-Semitism. And my parents were both Holocaust survivors. And I saw in my house, there was a picture of me as a 1-year-old in the New York World Telegram. If you sent in a picture of your 1-year-old with a birthday cake, they published it. Doesn't every Jewish parent want their kid in the newspaper in a good way? So I asked my parents, wait a minute, my name's Ross, why does that say Rosenwax? And my mother said, well, people get spelled it wrong, they mispronounced it, so we just changed it to Ross. It wasn't until I was in my 20s that my mother told me the real reason they changed it was if there was ever a pogrom in America, their children would stand a better chance with the name Ross than Rosenwax. And I thought my parents were absolutely paranoid. And I am sorry to say I don't think they are paranoid. I am sorry to say. But tonight, we have talked about such a rich culture that has been underwritten, not in our city, but across the country. And you're right, it is Ashkenazi-inflected universities that have not opened up to the broad experience of Sephardic, Mizrahi, Haredi Jews. It's Ashkenazi history. And thankfully, we have Tabi, Saba, Tina, Jasmine, and Gina all filling in some of these huge gaps for us with their unique stories, with literary inspirations, and with their life's work. And we look forward to hearing more from all of you in the future. Finally, I want to thank our partnering institutions who helped make this possible tonight, Sinai Temple and the Jewish Community Foundation, for bringing this vision to reality tonight. Your steadfast support and friendship is invaluable. And again, I have to thank my associate director. I just get up here and get to look good looking. But Lisa did all the work, and I'd love to thank her for that. And finally, I want to thank you all for coming and giving up part of your Sunday. And we want to invite you to our long talked about now, Kosher Tadik Bar, and I say, Nusa Jun Va Shab Bacher.
You hear a lot about anti-Semitism in academia and professors who don't care. He's an amazing professor who really cares. If your kids go to USC, make sure that they meet. That's lots of amazing